In the gaslit streets of Victorian London, a shadow moved through the fog-shrouded alleyways of Whitechapel, leaving behind a trail of terror that would echo through history. What began as isolated murders soon revealed patterns so disturbing, so methodically precise, that investigators found themselves confronting not just a killer, but something far more unsettling. The case files speak of evidence that defied explanation, witnesses who saw impossible things, and discoveries that suggested the true horror of Jack the Ripper extended far beyond the official record. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for regular updates. It was late August 1888 in the squalid district of Whitechapel, East London. The narrow cobblestone streets reeked of industrial smoke and human desperation. Among the cramped tenements and shadowy courtyards, where gaslight barely penetrated the perpetual fog, something began to stir. The Metropolitan Police files, now declassified after more than a century, revealed details that were deliberately omitted from public records. Inspector Frederick Aberline, the lead investigator, maintained a private journal that would not surface until 1973. His entries described not merely a series of brutal murders, but a phenomenon that challenged the very foundations of criminal investigation. The first documented victim, Mary Ann Nichols, was discovered in the early morning hours of August 31st on Bucks Row. The 43-year-old woman lay in a pool of blood that had formed an almost perfect circle around her body. Police Constable John Neal, who found the corpse, reported in his official statement that the blood appeared to have been arranged deliberately, as if by an unseen hand. What the newspapers never reported was the discovery made by Constable Neal 20 minutes after finding the body. Carved into the brick wall above where Nichols lay, fresh scratches formed a series of symbols that resembled no known alphabet. The marks were deep, as if made by something far stronger than human hands, yet no tools were found at the scene. Dr. Rhys Ralph Llewellyn, the first physician to examine the body, noted in his private medical records that the wounds displayed a precision that suggested advanced anatomical knowledge. The killer had removed specific organs with surgical skill, but more disturbing was the arrangement of the remaining tissue. The internal organs had been repositioned in a pattern that served no apparent purpose, yet followed a geometric logic that Llewellyn could not comprehend. 8 days later, Annie Chapman became the second official victim. Her body was discovered in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street in the early morning hours of September 8th. The 50-year-old woman had been mutilated in a manner strikingly similar to Nichols, but with additional elements that deepened the mystery. Police photographs, sealed in Scotland Yard archives until 1992, show that Chapman's personal belongings had been arranged in a precise pattern around her. A piece of envelope, 2 pills, and a small comb were placed at exact intervals, forming what appeared to be ritual positioning. The killer had spent considerable time at the scene, yet no witnesses reported seeing anyone enter or leave the confined courtyard. More disturbing was the testimony of John Richardson, a resident who had been in the backyard just 30 minutes before the body was discovered. Richardson swore under oath that the yard was completely empty when he checked it at dawn. The medical examiner determined that Chapman had been dead for at least 2 hours when found, creating an impossible timeline that investigators could never resolve. The third murder occurred on September 30th, but this night would prove to be different. Elizabeth Stride was found in Dutfield's yard, her throat cut but her body otherwise unmutilated. The killer had been interrupted, but by what or whom remained unclear. Louis Deemschutz, who discovered the body, reported that his horse had refused to enter the yard, rearing and backing away as if sensing something invisible. What made this case extraordinary was the second murder that occurred the same night. Less than an hour after Stride's body was found, Catherine Eddowes was discovered in Mitre Square, her body bearing the familiar precision mutilations. The killer had traveled nearly a mile through heavily patrolled streets without being detected, completing his work with the same methodical care, despite the increased police presence. Inspector Aberline's private notes reveal that a witness, Joseph Laund, had seen a man speaking with Eddowes just minutes before her death. Laund described the figure as wearing a deerstalker hat and a dark coat, but when pressed for more details, he became visibly distressed. In a later interview, Laund claimed the man's shadow had fallen in the wrong direction, despite the consistent gaslight, and that he had heard the stranger speaking in what sounded like multiple voices simultaneously. The most disturbing evidence came from the scene itself. Written in chalk on a wall near where Eddowes died were the words, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Police Commissioner Charles Warren ordered the message erased before dawn, claiming it might incite riots. However, Constable Daniel Halls had copied the text exactly, and his transcription revealed something the official reports concealed. The handwriting analysis, conducted by document expert Thomas Bond, showed that the letters had been formed by two different hands, writing simultaneously. The pressure patterns and ink flow indicated that multiple writing instruments had been used at the exact same time, creating characters that appeared to be written by a single person but were physically impossible for one individual to produce. The final canonical murder occurred on November 9th, when Mary Jane Kelly was found in her lodging room at 13 Miller's Court. The 25-year-old woman had been killed and mutilated beyond recognition, but the scene contained elements that defied logical explanation. Police photographer Walter Sickert's original prints, discovered in a private collection in 2005, show details that were cropped from all official documentation. The walls of Kelly's room were covered in symbols identical to those found at the first crime scene, but these covered every available surface. The marks appeared to have been made from inside the room, yet Kelly's body showed no signs of having made them. More unsettling was the discovery made by Inspector Aberline when he processed the scene. Kelly's room contained furniture and personal items that did not belong to her, including books written in languages that linguistic experts could not identify. The volumes were bound in leather that forensic analysis later determined was of unknown animal origin. The medical examination revealed that Kelly had been killed and mutilated with the same precision as the previous victims, but her organs had been arranged in a pattern that covered the entire floor of the small room. Dr. Bond's private notes described the arrangement as resembling a map or diagram, with each organ positioned according to some incomprehensible system. What the investigators never made public was the discovery of a photograph hidden beneath Kelly's mattress. The image showed a group of figures standing in a circle, their faces obscured by shadow despite the apparent daylight. In the center of the circle lay what appeared to be surgical instruments arranged in the same pattern found at each crime scene. The investigation took an even stranger turn when police began receiving letters allegedly from the killer. While most were dismissed as hoaxes, 3 letters contained details that had never been released to the public. The From Hell letter, received by George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, included a piece of human kidney that medical analysis confirmed came from Catherine Eddowes. What made this letter extraordinary was not its contents, but its physical properties. Forensic analysis conducted in 1957 revealed that the paper contained fibers that did not exist in 1888. The ink had been formulated using chemical processes that would not be developed until the 20th century. Yet the letter had been postmarked and documented by multiple witnesses in October of 1888. The handwriting expert brought in to analyze the letters, Frederick Wynne, made a discovery that he reported only to Inspector Aberline. The letters appeared to have been written by someone with detailed knowledge of each crime scene, but the handwriting showed characteristics that suggested the writer was ambidextrous in a way that exceeded normal human capability. The letter formation indicated that both hands were writing simultaneously, creating text that appeared normal but required impossible coordination. As the investigation progressed, witnesses began reporting sightings of the suspect that created more questions than answers. Multiple people claimed to have seen a well-dressed gentleman in the vicinity of each murder, but their descriptions varied in ways that suggested they were seeing different people entirely. However, all witnesses agreed on one detail. The man cast no reflection in the shop windows he passed. Police Constable William Smith reported following a suspect through the streets of Whitechapel on October 15th. According to his official statement, he pursued the figure for nearly 20 minutes, maintaining visual contact throughout the chase. The suspect led him through a series of narrow alleyways before disappearing into a dead-end courtyard. When Smith reached the courtyard seconds later, it was completely empty, with no possible means of escape. The most disturbing witness account came from Matthew Packer, a fruit seller who claimed to have sold grapes to Elizabeth Stride and her companion on the night of her murder. Packer's description of the man was consistent with other witness statements, but he added details that police chose not to include in their reports. According to Packer, the man had purchased the grapes using coins that appeared to be made of silver but left no metallic residue on his hands. When Packer examined the coins later, they had turned to what appeared to be ordinary stone. The investigation reached its most disturbing point when Inspector Aberline discovered a connection between all 5 crime scenes that had gone unnoticed. When mapped precisely, the locations formed a pentagram shape across the Whitechapel district. The mathematical precision of this pattern was so exact that it could not have been coincidental, yet there was no evidence that the killer had planned the murders with geographic considerations in mind. More unsettling was the discovery that each murder had occurred at times that corresponded to specific astronomical events. The positions of the moon and planets at each killing aligned with ancient calendars that predated modern astronomy. Dr. Edmund Halley, a consultant brought in to analyze the timing, determined that the killer would have needed access to astronomical calculations that were beyond the knowledge of most 19th century scholars. The final piece of evidence that convinced investigators they were dealing with something beyond ordinary criminal activity came from the autopsy reports. Dr. Bond's detailed medical examinations revealed that each victim had been killed using techniques that required not just anatomical knowledge, but understanding of human physiology that exceeded contemporary medical science. The precision of the cuts suggested that the killer could see internal organs and blood vessels before making incisions. The surgical skill demonstrated was consistent with someone who had performed identical procedures hundreds of times, yet no physician in London had the specific expertise displayed at the crime scenes. The killer's knowledge seemed to encompass medical techniques that would not be developed for decades. The most baffling discovery came in November of 1888, when police found a leather journal hidden in the walls of a building scheduled for demolition in Dorset Street. The journal contained detailed anatomical drawings of each victim, complete with notes about their internal organ placement and blood flow patterns. The drawings had been completed before the murders occurred. The journal's pages were filled with text in the same unknown language found in Mary Kelly's room, but included English translations that revealed the writer's true purpose. The murders were not random acts of violence, but precise procedures designed to accomplish something that the writer referred to as the opening of the way. According to the journal, each victim had been selected not for their availability or vulnerability, but for specific physical characteristics that corresponded to what the writer called the 5 points of access. The mutilations were not the work of a madman, but careful surgical procedures intended to create what the journal described as doors between the spaces. The final entry, dated November 10, 1888, one day after Mary Kelly's murder, contained a single sentence in English: "The work is complete, and the watchers may now pass through." The Jack the Ripper murders officially ended in November of 1888, but the Metropolitan Police files remain partially sealed to this day. Inspector Aberline's private journal disappeared from Scotland Yard archives in 1923, and all attempts to locate it have failed. The symbols found at each crime scene have never been deciphered, and the astronomical significance of the murder timing remains unexplained. What is certain is that the case represents something far more complex than a simple serial killer. The evidence suggests a level of planning and knowledge that challenges conventional understanding of both human capability and criminal motivation. The precision of the murders, the impossible witness accounts, and the physical evidence that defies explanation all point to a phenomenon that extends beyond the boundaries of ordinary investigation. The files remain classified not because they contain sensitive information about criminal procedure, but because they document something that authorities determined the public was not prepared to understand. What do you think really happened in those fog-shrouded streets of Whitechapel? Was Jack the Ripper a man driven by madness or something far more disturbing? Subscribe to explore more cases where the official story is just the beginning of the mystery.